Good morning and welcome. Another glorious day for another glorious goal, which is to come to know yourself better, accept yourself, and be confident enough to be yourself, no matter what's going on around you. I'm Atmadarshan or Laura, and we're doing this through the lens of a great spiritual book called Bhagavad Gita. You can do it through the lens of almost any spiritual book, and in fact, that's one of the topics we're going to look at today. Pardon me, I'm a little verklempt. Some of you have been sending in questions the past few days, which I really appreciate, and I thought today we'd take the opportunity to start answering them. And what I'm going to dive into right away is, I said yesterday in the video that the video was dedicated to some numbers, which I called magic numbers. And also that mantras or sound vibrations, words we speak with intention are sentient. Like they have a consciousness and awareness of their own. They are beings. And so I received an email. Can you talk about this a little further? So there is an idea in Western psychology and actually Western physics as well that jives in really nicely with a lot of Eastern teachings, which is basically, and you've probably heard this, where your attention is placed affects the universe. One of my favorite quantum physics experiments has to do with, it's the two-slit experiment. I think I've talked about it before in the video, but in case you're not remembering or I'm misremembering, it's the idea that there are two slits and a particle at random is going to be sent through one of these two slits, a very small particle. And then the detectors will let us know which slit that particle actually chose to go through. And when I say chose, I really mean chose. The particle chose, because what the researchers found with this experiment is that if they were looking at one particular slit because they were hoping or thinking or expecting or maybe just wondering what would happen if they looked at one slit over the other, whatever slit they were looking at, that's where the particle went through. Mind-blowing. There's so many quantum physics experiments like that and Western psychological experiments. The horribly groundbreaking Stanford prison experiment of 1971, where college students were assigned roles. And this was meant to go on for a few days. So it was set up that kind of like a play. Half the students in the class would be prisoners, and then some would be prison guards. I shouldn't say half. I'm not sure about the ratio. So some were supposed to play the role of prisoners and some were supposed to play the role of prison guards. And that experiment had to be stopped early because the prisoners started feeling like second-class citizens who were treated unfairly and judged by that label. And the interactions between the ones labeled guards took the power and ran, and it ended up being a very abusive situation just in a short time with these kids that had known each other outside of the experiment. And it has to do with how we invest our attention. And yoga says the same thing. I mean, you may have heard this from some spiritual or, some would say new age teachings where your attention goes, energy flows and things like that. And what yoga and what Western science say is it is absolutely true. So one of the reasons I dedicated yesterday to numbers is because many of us don't think of numbers as alive. However, they can be. If you follow the sport of baseball, numbers are the lifeblood of baseball. And those magic numbers were related to my favorite team. Okay. And they're not magic today anymore. They're different magic numbers today. And they do take on a huge significance. People will be asking, if you're in the baseball world and you're rooting for this particular team, what are the magic numbers? And people will write articles. And for a time, those numbers are so important. Then, not so much anymore. Even in the Gita, I use the importance of numbers to help me with my translation, because in the beginning of chapter 13, there's a verse 1, and some people say it is part of the Bhagavad Gita, and some versions of the Bhagavad Gita omit it. With the verse in, there's 701 verses in the Gita, and without the verse, there's 700. I chose to include it because, in my experience with the Indian subcontinent, which is now and may not have been then, but any number ending in 0 is unlucky. So when we would receive donations for a certain project, for example, we wouldn't receive donations that ended in 0 like Westerners might, but they ended in 1, at least, usually 1, but never the round number. And I was talking yesterday in a video about how in Japan, the number 4 is associated with death. Here in the United States, Friday the 13th just happened. The 13th, so unlucky. And it's the same thing in Japan, 4 is unlucky. And this can really affect people's perception. Where you put your perception, your attention, your interest, it's going to create a reaction in the physical world, material world. Scientists are proving this. So when I say that mantra, a string of words, can be sentient. And also, I was just listening to a great recording, thanks Roger and Jackie, about Christian contemplative prayer, which I had no idea even existed, despite having been raised Catholic. And it was basically, and the woman talking about it acknowledged it's mantra. She said, you pick a word, and that word becomes your root for everything. So you take a word, which is a series of sounds, which on their own, in most languages, don't have inherent meaning. They're a series of sounds organized to portray a meaning, but the sounds themselves may not have any particular meaning. And if you're getting my drift here, I'm not using my words well, but the idea that you can take these sounds, and if you put your awareness and attention into them, they can shape your life. They can have a huge impact on the world around you. And that's what I was mentioning with mantra. If you do a mantra of any sort long enough, I won't be able to convince you if you haven't experienced it, but I encourage you, if you're interested. It takes a long time and dedicated practice, but you can feel that the mantra is alive. And the mantra has certain qualities, like a personality. This is why the so-called deities, the gods and goddesses of yoga, even though probably the correct word is devas and devis, they're attributed with being alive, and they have their own mantras that you use to invoke them, to bring their energy to you, those sounds. I just encourage you to try this. No, don't try it, because you're already doing it. Just like the Stanford prison experiment, if you're looking at somebody with suspicion and distrust, they are going to act accordingly. If you're looking at somebody with more kindness and empathy, they are going to react accordingly. You are changing your world by the projections you put on it. Just like, think what it happens to you. Someone treats you with respect versus someone makes an assumption about you. And how does that make you feel and react? Probably differently. One of the goals of samatvam, equanimity, is no matter how others treat you, you're yourself. And when you can be yourself, be comfortable with yourself, then you let others be themselves. And one of the things Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita is he's simply letting himself unfold into the world for all to see, for all to experience. Wow. So that was a big yap. If you ever want to learn more about these concepts or other concepts, like I'm putting down below in my daily almanac, how the sunrise and sunset times are getting more and more equal because the equinox or equilux, depending on how you like to call it, is coming up in just a few days. My partner's leading a special class on that, and you can see below. Or if you want to learn about the deities, mantras, even though I'm recording this on a certain date, if you use the workshop link below, you'll find that we're having workshops on this all the time. Like while I'm recording this, there's going to be a free workshop a little later in September where we chant the healing mantra and try to really bring it alive for us. Okay. So today's practice is dedicated to Vera, and thank you for your questions, and to Josh Naylor, whom to many of you may not be a significant name at all, but to me, he's hugely important, and to many people in Cleveland, he's an extremely important guy, and his number is 22, and his brother's number is 23. All right. We're going to do a contemplation today about just reflecting on how you invest your attention in life and how that pays off. But first, let's practice focusing our attention with the balance pose. Yes, balance poses are said to help us focus. I need to focus this way. There we go. Switch sides. All right, time for contemplation. Well, there are some really cranky squirrels here today. Maybe they'll join me with meditation. For 5 minutes, I do invite you to contemplate just how you invest your attention, your intention, your emotional energy, and how you might notice that affects the world. 5 minutes. Welcome back. Whew. I hope you had an interesting contemplation. We're going to continue with this idea tomorrow, and then next we'll talk about children. And I'm going to see if I can rein in my yap so these videos don't get any longer than they are. We'll see what happens. Until next time.